We've had a couple of presentations, short presentations on emerging solutions or potentially emerging solutions. We're going to continue that for a couple more. The next presentation will be given by Kavita. Shukla. She is founder and CEO of Fenugreen. Kavita, we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so pleased to be here. And I'm really excited to share with you a really simple concept that I believe could change the way that we keep our food fresh. It looks like this. It's a little piece of paper that's infused with spices. So if you just drop this sheet into a refrigerator drawer, a fruit bowl, or any container filled with fruits and vegetables, it would keep everything in there fresh for 2 to 4 times longer. Now, if you've ever opened your fridge to find moldy strawberries or a bag of soggy spinach, you personally know how frustrating and expensive and disgusting food spoilage can be. But this little piece of paper is not just designed by use for consumers like you and me. Because it's so simple and low cost, it can actually also be used by small-scale farmers in the developing world, as well as by the large-scale growers that are supplying our grocery stores. As we've been hearing all day, today, despite all the technologies we have, spoilage and food waste are massive global challenges. This small sheet of paper could significantly reduce food spoilage and the massive land, water, energy, and human costs associated with it. But my story really starts here. This is a picture of me with my grandmother when I lived in India. And after I immigrated to the United States with my family, I got to go visit my grandmother. And this is just me and her in her kitchen. So before I left, I was 12 years old. My mother warned me to be really careful about drinking the tap water. That was a very strict instruction. And so, of course, on my first day there, I was brushing my teeth, and I drank almost like an entire cup. And I started to panic. I was convinced that I was going to get sick. But my grandmother just went in her kitchen, this very basic kitchen, and came back with this, just like a murky brown mixture. It was a spiced tea that she'd put together, and she said, oh, if you just drink this, you should be fine. I was a skeptical 12-year-old, but I didn't really have any other option. So I drank it. And I ended up actually not getting sick for the rest of my time there. And I still remember, for me as a little girl, that was such a magical moment because I couldn't believe that my grandmother, with very few resources, could have made something that seemed so powerful. And so for me, that moment actually sparked what became a lifelong fascination, almost an obsession with spices. And I started to learn from my grandmother about the spices she'd used in this tea. And then as soon as I got back home to the US, to Maryland, where I grew up, I tried to do a really simple middle school science project. And it was very, very simple. I was adding spices to jars of dirty pond water. That was it. But as the weeks went on, I started to notice that it looked like something was going on, that it looked like some of the spices were maybe stopping bacterial or fungal growth. And one day when I was at the grocery store with my mom, I saw some moldy strawberries and was inspired to try dipping strawberries in my mixture. So I ran home and I went in my garage, I set this up, and a few days later when I went back, the results were just astonishing. I couldn't believe it. And so I ran out and I got many different fruits and vegetables, and every single time, it really seemed to work. So to make a long story short, after spending most of my high school years as this weird kid meticulously rotting fruits and vegetables, I created fresh paper. And fresh paper is a really simple concept. It's also biodegradable, compostable, and recyclable. So I really believed that it could make our food system more sustainable. And I was only in my senior year of high school. I was 17 years old when, after I'd won some science fairs, I found out that I would be able to get a patent for my idea. And it was a pretty unlikely outcome to my story. It was so far beyond anything I could have ever imagined. But even at that young age, I was acutely aware that my grandmother, with all of her brilliance, never had the opportunity to pursue her ideas. And here I was, a young girl with a patent on my way to Harvard, where I thought I would definitely be able to do something with mine. So as soon as I got to college, I set out to build a nonprofit. But in the years that followed, what I really ended up learning was how hard it can be to give something away for free. There were so many complexities involved, but I think more than anything, every time somebody told me that I would need a lot more money, a lot more experience, a lot more degrees, Like now, the many young women I talked to, I really started to internalize that, and I believed it. And even though at that point I'd been working on fresh paper for most of my young life, I gave up on it. I started to believe that something so simple, something created by a child, would really never have any real-world applications. And so I got a job as a researcher. I was thinking about going to graduate school, but I was consumed by this idea. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I realized that sitting in my garage, it wasn't doing much, so I thought I would take it to my local farmer's market. And it was only about 4 years ago, so nearly a decade after I'd first started working on this idea, that I took a handmade batch of fresh paper to my local farmer's market in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I had stayed up all night, and I just started to hand out sheets to anyone who would come by. I had no idea what to expect, but I hoped the farmers might be able to use it to keep their produce longer and maybe donate what they had left at the end of the day. What ended up happening was something that I was completely unprepared for. The response as the weeks went on was just astonishing. Consumers actually wanted to buy fresh paper, and they were coming back week after week and telling me how it was affecting their lives. We started to hear things like, this makes it possible for me to afford feeding my family fresh, healthy food. And so we started to think a little bit bigger, and we didn't know it at the time, but a grassroots movement had begun at that farmer's market and started to take this simple idea to people in places all across the United States. Within a few months, we were taking wheelbarrows full of fresh paper to our local post office. And soon after that, we heard from our first major retailer, Whole Foods. At the time, I had no idea how to even begin working with a retailer like Whole Foods, and I'll never forget that meeting. It was just me and my co-founder and our intern, Kevin. And I took everyone because I thought if we all went, they would think we were a lot bigger and maybe give us the chance. But I also knew that if we could get a deal with them, it really might give us the chance to get this to the people that we had originally wanted to reach. And so we were shocked to hear shortly after the meeting ended that they wanted us to launch in the entire North Atlantic. I didn't know how we were going to pull it off, but a few weeks later, with the help of our community, with our customers, and the grassroots movement that had started, we made our first delivery. That's our distribution vehicle, a Toyota Corolla, in a sea of 18-wheelers at the Whole Foods distribution center. And that was how we started to scale. Within a year, we were starting to work with some of the largest retailers in the country. Within several months after that, we were shipping fresh paper to farmers and families across the globe. And what had started in my grandmother's kitchen became a phenomenon that reached people and places I could have never imagined. But I show you this, and I've tried to share my story with you because it still amazes me that as a child, I really believed that I myself could create something, that I as one person could do something that could make a difference, that could tackle something as complicated as food waste. But as I grew older, every time I heard that I would never be enough, I really started to believe it. But I look back at the farmer's market, the first time I actually put my idea in the hands of the people that could benefit from it. And I think about all of the moments after that where I was almost ready to give up and somebody showed up, whether it was a local farm stand owner, somebody from an NGO, or an expert who was willing to just lend an ear or a piece of advice. And all of you in this room have the power to start to implement innovations, really simple ideas that can make a huge difference. But I think for many of the people that are working on those, it really just takes one person. So I hope if there's one thing you'll remember from my story, it's that. And I also think about, what if I had taken that first moment when my grandmother came to me with her simple idea and dismissed it? I had so much skepticism and doubt, and I almost didn't believe. I almost didn't try it. But of course, the moment I did, everything changed. And the biggest lesson it's taught me is that sometimes the most simple ideas are the ones that are the most powerful. Thank you.